No matter how deep into this nervous system dysregulation, teen exhaustion, and depletion they've gone, we see these kids heal. It's incredible. Teenagers are ridiculously, incredibly resilient. In fact, they blew my mind. Teenagers, they are sick of being sick. Teenagers are sick of being stressed. Teenagers are sick of being anxious. Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, parents, here we go. This one is especially going to hit home for you if you are a parent of a teenager right now, or teenagers, plural. But also, don't stop listening if your kids aren't teens yet. Don't even stop listening if you don't have kids yet. Because the truth is, the teenage years are coming. And that is to be excited about. That is to be celebrated. That is something to look forward to. Now, isn't that a different perspective? Isn't that a different mentality as a dad of two teens and just one a few months away from will be in 3 teens at a time? That is a totally different mentality and perspective than you're going to hear from 99 out of 100 parents of teens in today's society. And actually, what we're going to talk about right out of the gates here with my story to set up the perspective, which will get us into the science, which will get us into the strategy to help you address what's called teenage nervous system dysregulation. So what are we talking about? Burnt out, exhausted, anxious, wound up, worn out, depressed, sick all the time, not living their best life teenagers. That life of a teenager and young adult, there is millions of kids stuck in this storm of nervous system dysregulation, nervous system depletion and imbalance and exhaustion and anxiety and depression and mental emotional disorders. There is millions more than there should be. And there's millions more of us parents accepting it as normal. And so my story that actually comes from real life practice. Remember, on this podcast, I promise to give you real life examples from practice and parenting myself. Then we'll explain things through science and get into action strategies from there. And that's what makes this podcast so helpful, is we're weaving between those two things at all times, not just neuroscience and research and clinical stuff, but real life. That's just God's path for me right now. And God's got me the dad, the parent of a couple of teens. And so I absolutely know what real life with teens is, and I know it's definitely significantly different in lots of ways. Some really, really great, and some we'll categorize as different in today's world compared to infants and toddlers and young children. But my story, to give me the perspective that I now, most importantly on this episode, if I share anything with you before we get into the actual science of dysregulation and why their adrenals and their digestion and their neurotransmitters and their microbiome and their mental emotional well-being are off, I will explain to you exactly scientifically why your kiddo is struggling. But to really get them out of the storm, we've got to start with perhaps our parental perspective that this is not normal, nor do you have to expect to battle 24/7, 365 through the teenage years. You have to be ready to adapt. You have to be ready to handle things significantly differently. And that's what I want to help you with, because the perspective with which you take into this season, I have found myself, parenting-wise and clinically, is the most important thing I could share with you on this episode. So here's where it started for me many years ago, 10 plus years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but I know that my kids were still very, very little. Now, I've spoken about this maybe on the podcast before. I definitely talk about this with my inner circle of my friends all the time. I have had this incredible, distinct cheat code and advantage to parenting being a pediatric and family chiropractor, because my first patients I ever started to care for in clinic were teenage and young adult patients and full families. And so I not only got to see their struggles and the things they're going through with their health and help them get through that. When you're a pediatric and family chiropractor, if you're brand new to this, what you may not know is we build, to call it the strongest relationship in healthcare, care would be an understatement. We see our patients with a high frequency, like our wellness patients get adjusted once a week. I adjust my wellness. So we call this proactive. I don't really love the word prevention, but we're always moving health forward, even when we don't have any symptoms or challenges. Like that's the most miraculous care, is the kids who never struggled, right? Those are the loudest miracles that never get told because they're not as loud, and that's us too on our Instagram and Facebook, as to the kiddo who was locked into autism, locked into teen anxiety and depression and medication, and now is thriving and living their best life. What about all the kiddos who we didn't ever want to go into the storm? The perspective and the science I have to share today is equally effective for your families, no matter where you are in that walk. And so I got to learn this perspective by two moms who literally were in back-to-back adjustments with me. And there's some funny stuff to this story. Here's the funny first part. I ended up sounding like and acting like an absolute moron, okay? So stick with me here. When you get to hear the story, you're like, ooh, you put your foot in your mouth. I sure did, twice in a row, and that's how I got such perspective. So the way we work when we're adjusting is we have different rooms as we go back and forth, and we love to move. We're active chiropractors, so we're on the move. And I went from one room, and I was adjusting one mom. And there's actually some cool little granular details with this. What we've always done with our practice when our moms are perhaps right on that edge of burnout and stress and anxiety and their nervous systems being dysregulated as well, we'll always encourage them to actually come in on their own. Dads too, I shouldn't forget us. We always encourage parents to come in and get adjusted on their own in the morning while their kids are in school. Now, that's just something I figured out years ago, that I could actually take better care of our moms and better care of our parents, because we're all just default as a parent. When our kids are in the room and our kids are with us, we don't care about ourselves at all. In fact, you almost have to force, pull, and pry information from a parent out about their own health. So one little cheat code we did with scheduling is we actually really encourage our parents to come in the morning or the midday if they can by themselves for their appointments, because we're able to get better information and connection and empowerment with them. And honestly, we're just able to get a better adjustment because they have that space, that kind of free space, we'll call it, to focus on their own well-being. So maybe some of you are going to the chiropractor on the regular. I know it's a little bit more challenging logistically, but let's say you live close and you can make 2 trips per day. You go while your kid's in school, then pick them up and they can get adjusted, and you're already finely tuned and rocking. So that's exactly what happened for these two rock star moms, Lauren and Kelly, okay? So I'm adjusting Lauren first, and her kids had just, her first oldest son, had just had his birthday that had him become a teenager. And I made the classic, everybody says this statement, oh boy, look out. And for this mom, it was like, I know it's gonna be so different. And she was pretty stressed about it, okay? Then we had that conversation, and that was a pretty standard expected conversation. Then the next room I went in, and I'm adjusting Miss Kelly and this incredible family, both absolutely incredible families. Fast forward to the end. All of their teenage kids are literally thriving, serving in the Marines, getting athletic scholarships and academic scholarships to college for another one from that first family. Second family, we've got pastors and doctors coming from this family. So just like these two had it dialed in, which is why I'm sharing their story through this podcast, because they shared it with me, and it was so essential to me being able to do the best job I can do for my teenagers with this perspective. So I know it's a long story, especially told in my lens, but hang with me on this, because the second room is where I got kicked right in the you know what. I said the same thing to Kelly when she said, the teenager, they have this going on, that's going on, they're stressing me out. And she didn't say that, actually said that completely wrong. I'm stressed out. We just got a lot going on. The kids are busy and this is going on. And I said, oh yeah, same stupid thing I said there. Oh yeah, teenagers, right? It's got to be so awful and so hard and so terrible. She stood up from the adjusting table. Now, I am vertically challenged, and this wonderful family is the opposite of that. They are very tall, and this mother is she means the world to me. I had such a great relationship with so many of my patients, and this one just stuck. And she stood up with love, empathy, and authority and said, no, Dr. Tony, it doesn't work like that in our family. I know for sure that as my kids become teenagers and young adults, that my relationship with them will change in a lot of ways. It'll have a different form, and it'll have a different kind of wiring to it. But in the most important of ways, how much we love each other, how much we communicate each other, how much we understand each other, and how much we respect each other other and are each other's best friends, that will never change with my kids. And the way this rock star mom told that story with such conviction and certainty and holy cow accuracy of, impact, I'm going to call it, stuck with me that day. And again, my kids were little and it never left me. So when Addison, Oliver, and now Elena will be there next, and then the little wild one, Tiny, will be there one day, I'm going into these teenage years knowing things are going to change. Things are going to be different. But it is not normal, just like we teach you, it's not normal for a kiddo to scream, an infant to be colicky, gassy, refluxy, constipated, eczema, and sick all the time, and they don't grow out of that. And it's not normal for a kiddo to skip crawling, have delayed motor milestones, sensory meltdowns, and grow into autism, ADHD, and those nervous system dysregulation challenges we covered on a previous episode for younger kids. It's also not normal for your kiddo to be excessively, all day, every day, exhausted, anxious, emotionally just out of balance severely, and struggle to sleep, struggle with their digestion, struggle with their self-confidence, struggle with their socialization and their emotional regulation, struggle with school and grades and making friends, struggle with their immune system and be sick all the time. We have accepted chronic illness throughout the whole family. We've accepted it with our little ones, and we've accepted it in a societal norm with our teenagers as well. Instead, what we can do is we can have a better perspective of what does change, what is really changing with their nervous system, with their hormones, with their physiology and their biology, because absolutely change happens, and absolutely that can throw moods and the amount, I'll tell you that, the amount that they communicate or don't. You ever try and text your teen? Getting more than 2 words back is, if you get a text back that says more than yeah, not even the H, just Y-E-A, not capitalized because they don't capitalize when they text, or okay, right? If you get a text that is more than 1 word back from your teenager, will you please launch an online course and Instagram page? Because I'm thriving right now in my relationship with my teenagers, but that is one thing I have not been able to conquer is the 2-word text reply. Unless they're asking to get something approved from Amazon or stay out a little bit later, right? So the truth is things change. Their nervous systems change, our relationships change, but the number one thing I'm telling you with my long 10-minute plus story to kick this one off is the way we change the health of our teens and young adults is we first shift our perspective to say, not in this house, not in this family. We will maintain optimal neurological health, optimal physiological, holistic health. You're like, well, that's a weird way. That's a nerdy way to say it. Yeah, that's where it all starts. Things will change for the much worse if we let their nervous systems go into exhaustion and dysregulation and dysfunction and depletion. And I'm going to teach you the exact neuroscience of why so many teens are really, truly struggling with anxiety and depression, and therefore relationships with parents and peers and everyone is at an all-time tough place. But when we understand the perspective, then the neuroscience, that's the 2-step tango we can take to absolutely shift and transform your lives, the lives of your teenagers, and your whole family as a result. Okay? So let's step into the basics of this myth. It's a myth because it doesn't explain the neurology. The neurology is real, but if we tackle the nervous system and we get it regulated and we get it balanced and we make sure that our kids' health is thriving, then there will be these differences that are totally normal as their brain and their hormones and different things mature and grow and get ready for independence. They will be less in need of you. They will communicate a little bit less with you. And sadly, this one I'm still not over, even in preparation for this podcast. They probably won't hang out with you quite as often. And you're definitely going to need to upgrade your dad jokes to the best of all time because the audience gets a little bit or a lot of bit judgier as they go forward, okay? So here's the reality. What if the absolute challenges you're facing with your teen isn't them naturally, innately at all? What if you're most heartbroken about the challenges you see your teen having because you know that's not them? What if you absolutely know that they are caring, they are loving, they do love to make friends, they are super creative and empathetic and outgoing and communicative and fun and goofy and all the different incredible elements of your child's personality that maybe came out in spades when they were younger and through grade school? And what parents tell me all the time is it's almost like there was a dimmer switch or sometimes even the flick of a switch when their kiddos hit these teenage years. And a lot of that just awesomeness, we'll call it, of their personality started to disappear and become replaced with exhaustion, anxiety, depression, chronic gut issues, chronic autoimmune issues, motor tics, behavior challenges, outbursts, anger, aggression for some cases as well. And that is what parents are looking to do, is absolutely number one, get rid of the bad stuff, get out of the storm. But when I really get to sit knee to knee with parents, I actually get to hear and feel what they're really asking for our help for, because I'm a parent too. They're asking to get rid of the bad stuff so we can get back to the good stuff, so we can have our teens and our young adults meet their full potential, and the whole world, not just us inside our house and not just in their classroom, but the whole world see your child, your soon-to-be adult, at their very best. We know that God has called them to just incredible, miraculous, life-transforming things, but they can't get there if their nervous system is dysregulated, dysfunctional, and depleted. So let's get into the science of nervous system dysregulation, which is the bad side of the coin, which is also then we get to talk about nervous system regulation, and recharging and restoring and rebalancing our teens' nervous systems is the key to getting them to that thriving full potential. So let's go back to the basics. If you're just tuning into the podcast, say for the first time, maybe you haven't gone as far down. And for those of you that have listened to I don't know when this will come out, 50 plus episodes, you're like, I can teach some, he's going to go gas pedal, he's going to go brake pedal, he's going to go to the perfect storm. I am, real quick. So here's the basics of the nervous system. 2 modes of operation: gas pedal, fight or flight, sympathetic overdrive. Super important, super healthy, protective side of the nervous system. It's actually good to be on that side of the nervous system when they're busy throughout the day, moving through classes, need to be tuned in, paying attention. In sports, getting after it. We're all actually naturally, healthfully supposed to be a little more sympathetic derived during the day. But the other side of the nervous system, the parasympathetic, which means counter, opposition to the gas pedal and fight or flight and stress and anxiety response, is the calming, relaxing, regulating, digesting, sleep side of the nervous system. The parasympathetic system is very, very, very connected to what's called the vagus nerve, VAGUS. We talk about that on this podcast and our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube page all the time. And there's tons of articles if you want to read more about it on the website, pxdocs.com. And the vagus nerve, and actually a conversation around vagus nerve dysfunction, is the absolute first close cousin of this conversation, nervous system dysregulation. They're really one and the same, along with another term called dysautonomia. And so here's what we actually know about the neuroscience behind the dramatic rise in teen anxiety, depression, behavior issues, aggression, violence, bullying, autoimmune disorders, digestive disorders, even epilepsy and seizures. The neurology is actually basically all the same. It is a severe, I can't church this one up. It's a severe and significant imbalance in their nervous system that leads to high levels of nervous system dysregulation. Now we've thrown in not only those early life factors of high stress pregnancies, birth trauma, and all the things that you were told they would grow out of, the colic, the constipation, the chronic ear infections that led to tons of antibiotics that destroyed their gut, their microbiome, and their ability to make serotonin and dopamine, which they need all throughout life, especially to regulate their emotions and pay attention in school later on. And we know these things now were made worse by social media and smartphones. So we took the pressure of school and being a teen and we plug them into it 24/7, 365. And I've done a whole episode about this. We'll link it in the show notes about the overuse of technology and the fueling the rise of teen anxiety and depression. But it's really many issues deep within this one, smartphones and social media. Because one, we're not supposed to be plugged in that much to everyone. You know, naturally, teenagers do care. They're still developing the maturation of what matters in life and what doesn't. And what doesn't matter in life is really what other people think of you. But they don't know that yet. That's to be learned later on. And they go through it all day at school, and then they're stuck to it if we let them be stuck to those phones and devices and social media. And the problem within the problem is this. Nobody treats people digitally like they treat people in real life. Promise you, you've made this mistake yourself with the comment you said and what you shouldn't have said it and the way you said it. That's just real life. I have. We all have. It's so weird and so not good in a lot of ways. Now, we use digital platforms for good. We reach you. We find you. We're serving your family that way. So it's like everything God has given us in life. It's how we use it which determines its outcome, positive or negative. But what happens in today's world is teens and everybody will say things on Snapchat and on a comment stream on Instagram or a DM that they would never, ever say in person, no matter how rude or mean. You know, they could be the freaking vice president of the Mean Girls Society. And for the most part, I guess I could probably get a little asterisk on that. Humans don't say that to each other in person. They freaking say that to each other online. And that is, again, you're like, he's not just talking about teen problems right now. No, I'm not. I'm talking about our societal problems right now. And so anxiety disorders are 31% ages 13 to 18, 38% of girls. Since COVID, there was a 37% increase and 44% feeling sad and hopeless on the regular. The academic pressure is at 61%. Social media has led to a 91% of teens in the UK use it for more than 3 hours or more, and it's been directly linked to increased rates of anxiety, depression, and sleep. I could go on and on. My team prepared with all sorts of stats, but I don't want to get you the stats. I want to get you the real life understanding of what we're up against, because it's real. We got to really understand this at a deep level, and then we've got to deploy every strategy we can to fully get our kids better. And that's why we got to understand the stress of nervous system and the science of nervous system dysregulation one more notch. And here's what I want to give you from the signs and symptoms of nervous system dysregulation. It's not just the mental and emotional health of anxiety, depression, overwhelm, focus, concentration, and socialization challenges, okay? It's not just their increased sensitivity to any trigger whatsoever from you, from friends, from siblings. That sensitivity is absolutely a sign of sympathetic dominance and nervous system dysregulation. But this will actually, for most teenagers, show up first and foundationally physically. Meaning, signs of nervous system dysregulation in a teen include inability to fall asleep, stay asleep, and get good sleep. It'll show up with chronic gut issues, stomach pains, reflux, bloating, gas, and just honestly, a lot of times in teens, that will then turn into even eating disorders. And those are so often, of course, they're said, oh, that's psychological, that's a psychiatric condition. Well, that's so often neurogenic. Their nervous system is so dysregulated, so overstressed and out of balance. The nervous system controls the whole body. And when the nervous system goes into fight or flight, and it's in this chronic aroused anxiety state, that takes a lot of energy. That takes a lot, and I'm not talking woo-woo weirdo energy. That takes a lot of energy from the body's energy stores neurologically and physiologically. And so if our body physically, neurologically is stressed out, wound up 24/7 like so many teens, we have to steal and rob that energy from some other department of the body. And the first place that the nervous system steals energy for this fight or flight excessive dysregulated response is the gut and the gastrointestinal system. It'll decrease motility. I have found clinically that about 80% of our teen patients, male and female, who are struggling with anxiety and depression have constipation, severe constipation. Then it goes on to the immune system, because the immune system is another system that needs to take up a lot of energy. It needs a lot of resources to do its job. So when a child is in this hypersensitive, sympathetic dominant state, we know that it leaves the immune system suppressed, the immune system dysregulated. The immune system is in a pro-inflammatory state, which further feeds the sympathetic response. That's why we call this the perfect storm or a vicious cycle of stress. And then the endocrine system, their adrenals, their thyroid, their pituitary. So this is why it starts to affect, and they're on this roller coaster of energy. Sometimes they're hyper aroused and anxious and wound up and agitated and angry. And the next moment, they're exhausted and depleted and depressed. And the worst of these cases, medically, psychiatrically, get a bipolar diagnosis. And it also shows up cognitively, and it'll show up in the classroom. It'll show up when they try and study. It'll show up when they try and do those things, because when your nervous system is dysregulated, dysfunctional, and depleted, it's really hard to focus. It's really hard to concentrate. Our memory system of our brain literally shifts to where the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain, is running the show, and the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, which is where learning and decision-making is done, gets shut down, because the nervous system, when the whole nervous system is dysregulated, the brain is imbalanced as well. So those are the signs of a nervous system that is dysregulated. And the final thing I want to teach you about the science, and I've done a whole episode about this called neurological exhaustion, and I talked about it throughout all kids in the whole family, but I want to isolate it into the teenager conversation here. What we're really talking about in a chiropractic landscape, we have a specific kind of chiropractic, neurologically focused chiropractic. We have a catch-all word for all of this that I've been talking about, and that word is called subluxation. Subluxation is a state of the nervous system that means it's out of balance. It's dysregulated. There is interference between the communication of the brain and the nervous system and all the different organs, components, and parts of the body. And because the nervous system is air traffic control, when there is subluxation, everything downstream starts to malfunction or dysfunction as well. Subluxation is synonymous with sympathetic dominance and dysautonomia, where the parasympathetic and the vagus nerve are shut down. So if we have a catch-all term, and when you hear it on this podcast, when you hear this word, which is maybe brand new, probably brand new to your family, and even other providers, is subluxation is not a bony, musculoskeletal, structural problem. Subluxation is a neurological issue. That means sympathetic fight or flight stress stuck on. Now, that's only the first component of subluxation. When subluxation is in a child's life, it's not a one-time event that comes and goes. It's a neurological status that gets worse because the vicious cycle that we've been talking about here on this one especially. So the second component of subluxation creates the dysregulation. When the nervous system gets out of balance and it's got too much sympathetic tone and too little vagus nerve, parasympathetic, relaxation, coordination, integration, regulation, you end up with dysregulation. So the second component of subluxation is disorganization, dysregulation, dysfunction. We like to kind of nickname that confusion. This is where your teen's on that roller coaster. You don't know which day or which thing's going to get them wound up and which thing's going to get them worn out and shut down. Dysregulation, the second part of subluxation, also really shows up back to what we just talked about. It'll show up in the gut, and it'll mess with gut health. It'll show up in their immune system, and it'll cause them to be chronically sick all the time. Autoimmune, PANS is a severe version of this. And then stage 3 of subluxation is really where we find, unfortunately, the majority of our perfect storm nervous system dysregulated teenagers today. Back to the perfect storm they went through when they were little, all the stress of fertility and pregnancy and labor and delivery and colic and developmental delays and antibiotics and all the stress and pressure of the world from school and smartphones and just life. And when you get to stage 3 of subluxation and nervous system dysregulation, you end up with what's called neurological exhaustion and depletion. I've been using that term all the way through today, but I really want to isolate it because subluxation over time, it progresses through these 3 stages. And each progressive stage is worse to your child's daily quality of life, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, physically, digestively, immunologically, endocrine system, you name it. When they get into nervous system exhaustion and depletion and the final stage of nervous system dysregulation, that's when the quality of life absolutely plummets. That's when so often they give up on sports. They give up on getting up and going to school, and that becomes difficult. When they are in school and in class, they're so exhausted, they can't pay attention. They're so lacking self-confidence, they can't make friends or they lose friends because they are so wound up. They overreact and have issues there. So I could go on and on in this last section of this podcast episode about how nervous system dysregulation and subluxation, when it gets to its third and final phase of progression, exhaustion and depletion, what is actually happening, and this is the final chapter of the science, I promise, that whole gas pedal, too much fight or flight, and the whole brake pedal, too little regulation, when you get to stage 3 of subluxation, full-on teen, young adult, neurological exhaustion and depletion, they actually both shut down. So if you feel like my kiddo is not even trying anymore, they maybe used to be hyperactive and impulsive and anxious, and now they're not even that. They're just literally fully shut down emotionally, physically. They've lost all their confidence, all their drive, all their what I kind of call mojo for life. And that probably hits your heart the most. And that's also the stage where obviously it's much easier to feel like we need a life preserver. And so that's when you tend to get into psychiatry appointments, neurologist appointments, inpatient sort of appointments. And that's when kids get absolutely loaded up on medications that do nothing at all to actually address the root cause of their conditions. Do nothing at all to address the nervous system imbalance and dysregulation and challenges they're having. In fact, when those medications, which are chemical manipulation of an imbalanced neuro system, you want to know why the neurotransmitters are depleted? Because the nervous system is depleted. So the chemical imbalance theory, I'm going to do a whole podcast on this very soon. It is an accurate scientific explanation of anxiety and depression and ADHD and mental emotional disorders, but it is an incomplete explanation. Why are these neurotransmitters imbalanced? Because the nervous system gets imbalanced and dysregulated first. And so when medication comes in, we fully understand it, parents. If you're listening to this and you're in that moment and have been in that part of life, goodness gracious, it makes for great sense. It is fully understandable, and we fully empathize with you that when your teen is literally in the center of the struggle bus and has been for months, if not years, and it's not one condition and not just one problem, but a multitude, it makes sense that those medical interventions would be that last resort and that last card to play and say, just help us get through this. And again, if we go all the way back to the beginning and we recap it with the middle of the science and the end here, the truth is that's a much easier decision to make if we accept that there's nothing we could have done anyways. If we accept that teens are just going to be full of angst and anxiety and agitation and exhaustion, and this is genetic and this is normal. See, the medical intervention of medications makes sense when the medical explanation of why a child or a teen or anyone is struggling, you have to start there first. If that philosophical, scientific perspective or explanation makes sense, well, then the intervention does too. But when we dig into the actual research today, and forget the research and forget the science just for a second, look around. Why is it that some teens are thriving? Why is it that some teens are not dealing with anxiety, not dealing with exhaustion, not dealing with dysregulation, not dealing with chronic gut issues, not dealing with chronic immune and autoimmune challenges? Because again, those are huge. If you feel literally like crap, your gut and you're sick, ever heard of the man cold and how dysregulated emotionally a husband gets when they get even like one nostril 10% congested? So this is real stuff that when we feel like crap physically, digestively, immunologically, we feel like crap emotionally. And so we have to get all of this addressed. So what medicine doesn't do, conventional medicine, psychiatric, neurological stuff, they just throw drugs at it. They just throw psychoactive, side effect riddled Band-Aids at best at it. And what we do is we throw the kitchen sink of root cause, drug-free, natural, neurological interventions at these teens who are struggling with exhaustion, anxiety, depression, pandas, POTS, dysautonomia, epilepsy, functional neurological disorder. We see it all in our clinic, and it is our specialty. And right now today, because I started with a story and my perspective as a parent of teens, I got to just share it with you. As launching this podcast this year, I knew that on a very frequent basis, I was going to do episodes specifically directed to parents of teenagers, because I get to see the opposite of what I get to have the parental real life dad experience that is so stinking fun. Again, it's different. It's not the same at all as when they were little. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's why I love it even more. Each season that my kids grow up and transition, I definitely miss the one they're transitioning out of, but I get so stoked and so excited to experience and be a part of the one they're going into. Because I know we're going to absolutely, positively, always focus on the health of their nervous system first. And so here's the solutions. Here's the things I would do to give your teenager this extra support. Number one, take this perspective. Listen to this one again if you find that it will serve you, your family, and your experience. Remember, this is the Experience Miracles podcast, and that's what we want to do. We want to transform your experience, especially if you're struggling, especially if you're in the thick of the storm in a tough place. We really want you to hear this twice. And we also really, really, really want to reach people ahead of the storm and keep you from it, because that would be the smoothest, bestest. That's not the smoothest, bestest English, but that would be the smoothest, bestest experience. So number one, borrow that perspective from Kelly. And then I shared it with Lord, and I shared it with everybody else. And it's always been a very big principle. See, our practice in PX Docs, we don't just adjust, we empower. We share these resources, we share these perspectives. So number one, that perspective. It's the most powerful thing, honestly, I could teach you on this episode. Number two, really focus on having access to neurologically focused chiropractic care on the regular. If you don't have it yet, get to the directory, get in. Normally, I'm a little bit more easy going on this action step. If your teen is struggling with anxiety, your teen is struggling with dysregulation, depression, exhaustion, agitation, anger, ADHD, bipolar. Again, I know the medical world would go, where's the research? Where's the research on doling out medication after medication that further imbalances an imbalanced nervous system that's the root cause of these conditions anyways? So it isn't about who has more research. They've just had more money to market more aggressively to us about this conversation. And they needed us to accept that it's genetic and it's normal first, so we'd purchase. And the funny thing is, guess who pays for it? Insurance companies, right? No parent would actually go down those roads if we had to actually go that way. So, number two, put nervous system focused chiropractic on the front choice, first choice, and the first thing you do to really get your kiddo's nervous system optimized. It is not a treatment or a cure for anxiety or depression or anything. It is a direct care approach for subluxation and nervous system dysregulation. And the reason we spend so much time breaking down the science, when we put a condition into the title of a podcast episode or a video or an article, or we put a condition into the conversation of an episode like this, it's only to give it relatability to you, because you've been told, hey, this diagnosis is the problem. But you're a parent, you know better. The diagnosis is not the issue. It's the neurophysiology that is dysregulated and out of balance and dysfunctional, causing the symptoms, causing the signs that add up to the diagnosis. And it's those challenges day to day that are disrupting your family's quality of life. To dramatically, incredibly transform your quality of life, go after their nervous system, go after the root cause. And then number three, what's so awesome about working with a PX doc and just this community is we build community around our patients, and we bring in other supportive measures. We bring in other supportive professionals who focus on sleep, who focus on nutrition, who focus on supplementation if some of that depletion has gotten really, really bad, who focus on different natural, drug-free, holistic root cause health interventions. And when we put them all together, we see kids go from, no matter how deep into this nervous system dysregulation, teen exhaustion, and depletion they've gone, we see these kids heal. It's incredible. And I'll leave you with that. Teenagers are ridiculously, incredibly resilient. In fact, they blew my mind. Teenagers, They are sick of being sick. Teenagers are sick of being stressed. Teenagers are sick of being anxious. Teenagers are sick of being low energy. Teenagers are sick of having gut issues and immune issues. So the moment that and they're also brilliant and their brains are developed and they're ready and they're searching and they're looking for answers themselves. And so it's this intersection of where we can actually, through PX Docs Network, we communicate this directly to the teens. We empower them, we educate them, we inform them, and we say, you've got this. You can take charge of this with our help. And we form a partnership with the parents. We form a partnership with our patients. And we say, here's your way out of the storm. Let's get you adjusted, reset, recalibrate, and regulate your nervous system. That is the first foundational step. Number 2, once you're not feeling like crap all the time, once you're not exhausted all the time, then you won't be so addicted to sugar and Rockstar energy drinks and bad decisions, because you're trying to get your kiddo to change their nutrition when their nervous system is depleted and exhausted, and the nervous system dictates cravings. So you fix the nervous system first, and nutrition and lifestyle intervention, which I love you, and you've been trying to get you're working your butt off to get your kiddo to understand that they got to eat healthier, that they got to be active, they got to have better sleep habits. That's really hard to do when you're exhausted and neurologically dysregulated all the time. So there's a sequence. Number 1, perspective. Number 2, nervous system focused chiropractic. The science is pure. That is where to start. And then number 3, lifestyle intervention and modification. Number 3 gets so much easier with number 2. But number 4 is actually sharing number 1 with your teenager. See, what we do in our office and what we do with this platform, and I want you to share this, have your teen listen to this one. If they're struggling, have them listen to it. Teenager homies, lean in, listen. I feel you. I got you. I was a teenager who struggled with ADHD. I was a teenager when I was 19 who had a significant loss of a loved one in our family that affected me and affected my parents and my best friend and my dad, and it was awful. And I went deep into the storm, and that's when God sent me chiropractic, and that's when I started to get adjusted. And I went from struggling and almost dropping out of college, nerdy McNerderson here, who freaking loves college and school. I almost lost it because my nervous system became, I didn't know it at the time, I know it now, became so depleted and so dysregulated and so exhausted. I couldn't sleep, so I couldn't go to class. When I was in class, I couldn't pay attention. I just was losing life, making terrible decisions to try and make up for my nervous system dysregulation. So what we do in our office and what I want to do with this platform is also speak directly to them and say, you got this. What we need to do first is get your nervous system functioning better. So honestly, just plain frickin' English, you can feel better. After they start to feel better, they make better decisions with their sleep, with their nutrition, with their hydration, with their friends, with what they do and don't do. And then they get back to life, full send, full smiles, full riz. They probably are going to be super ticked that I said that. I do not think that's the right context for that term whatsoever. But it is. I do know this. Cheeks and buns is bad. This is the opposite of this. I keep asking my kids, what is the opposite of cheeks? And I don't know, and I don't get a good answer. Okay? Fire? I think maybe. Gosh, I'll stop now. Okay, teens, I love you. And I hope at least I hope 1,000 of you are listening to this and get to the end of this where you can hear me too. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to be exhausted. You don't have to be anxious. You don't have to be depleted. You don't have to struggle with friends. You don't have to struggle with your self-confidence. You don't have to not know what to do next. The way God designed us is to be healthy at every freaking stage of life. And that starts with the nervous system, getting it regulated, getting it rocking, full speed, full health, full function. That starts with seeing a chiropractor. It's got to be the right kind of chiropractor, a nervous system focused chiropractor. So I just want you to know this, parents, you do not have to accept this. Teens are going to be teens, and it's going to be awful. It absolutely, positively can be awesome. And teens, if you're listening to, I didn't even know I was going to do this at the end. And parents, if you want to send it to them, please do, even if you just kind of lean into this last little soundbite. But I'll tell you this, it's the best time of life, okay? It is where you should have full energy and full confidence and just get after it and go into whatever it is God called you to do, full send. You need a fully operating, rocking, functioning nervous system to do that. And the best place to do that is to get into a nervous system focused PX doctor and get that care. So y'all, I really pray that this one helped you. As always, I probably went 10, 15, 20 minutes longer than I planned to on my outline. But Big heart for this one. Big real life experience for this one. We got to work at it every single day. I adjust my kids on the regular. We work on their nutrition on the regular. We work on conversations and character building, and making sure that they stay close in their walk with Jesus and their faith and their relationship, and build their character and their conviction, and they have a purpose. I could have gone on for 6 hours as to what we all do, but I needed to have the nervous system regulation conversation, because that's where it all starts. Everything else good you can do for your teen becomes much more limited in its potential if their nervous system is dysregulated. So please, everybody, once again, not only subscribe and leave a review and download. It really helps if you're hitting the download button, not just the listen button, just getting a little granular there. It really helps if you leave a review, because we can reach more families and more teens who might be right on the brink of, when you get depleted, real bad decisions can come from that over time, especially when medication gets in there and just wreaks havoc on an already imbalanced system. So you please not only download and leave a review, but please share it. Please, please, please share this podcast with every parent, especially those you know who are right in the thick of those teen years, and we can transform their experience from not good to freaking awesome. God bless. Be well. See you on the next one.